Hello and welcome to Your HR Career, podcast where I have interesting conversations with interesting HR people. Now, today we have the very marvellous Anna Roberts. Welcome. Now, I find it hard to call you Anna Roberts. You are Anna Patra in my mind. You always will be, but I give reference to John and your new world and your new marriage. But other people may know you as Anna Patra, so we might mention that. So welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you. I answer both to Anna Patra and Anna Roberts. So
that's good. So we have known each other for a very long time. I'm thinking what year it was. 1997? Maybe 98.
Maybe a little bit later. Maybe I think probably about maybe 2000.
Okay, so around then. So we worked together. So that is frighteningly 25 years ago.
Exactly.
We'll draw the veil over that. So we know each other well, but you've worked in different places since then. Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested to talk to you about your HR career. And if you've listened to any of the other podcasts, you'll know that I sent all of the people who are chatting to me a number of questions beforehand. So I'll refer to those as we go through the conversation. So as with everybody, let's start where it all began. So what was your first HR job and how did you find it?
So I went to an all-girls grammar school where the tradition at the end of A-levels was that you all pootled off to a university and did something and did a degree of some description. That kind of never really spoke to me very much. So I thought I'd look for a job. My parents wanted to make sure that I got a job in a proper type of organisation, something that, if they said to somebody, our Anna, she works for the council, then their friends would think, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Yeah. So the council is where I actually went. So they ran an admin trainee scheme. They took about 15 people a year, both at 16 and so post O-level, post A-level.
Yeah.
And off I went to work for the council, having not much of a clue really, apart from, well, the council does lots of different things. So there's bound to be some interesting opportunities, but importantly for me as well, opportunities for me to study a little bit more. So I knew I didn't want to go to university and study full time, but I knew I wanted to do something else. So my first placement was in personnel. Personnel, very different world from the world of HR as we know it today. So I've seen huge amounts of change over what is a frighteningly long career. So I started my first job in personnel and in admin. So I did all kinds of bits of recruitment. So I placed adverts, I fielded applications, I did lots of filing. I serviced a couple of personnel committee meetings as well, so with councillors and elected members. And I got the advantage of being given the opportunity to study for my CIPD qualifications. A completely different structure from CIPD today, but they were the IPM, Institute of Personnel Management qualifications when I did them.
Yeah.
So I did that on day release. So that was the kind of really good thing for me, that what I thought to begin with that I would get the opportunity to study, I actually did get.
Yeah.
And because I was doing that, we were supposed to rotate every 6 months, but I never did. I just stayed in personnel for as long as.
You want to go to finance or roads or wherever else?
Every so often they'd come and put a job under my nose in, somewhere like legal or environmental health. And I'd say, no, I don't really fancy that, thanks. But thanks for offering.
Yeah. So what was it about HR that landed well with you from the start then? What do you think it was?
I really quite enjoyed working in a central personnel department at the tail end of the 1970s. Again, very different from the way it probably is now, but everything was very centralized. So you did everything, you saw everything. And I got involved in some of the restructure work as it was planned for different departments. So we had a management studies or management services section to the department, and they went out and looked at structures, work structures, trying to be more efficient. This is, of course, also an age of pre-technology.
Yes.
So,
yes.
you know, paper, card indexes, all of those things that have largely been consigned to history. Well, they were all part of my kind of day-to-day working life. So you actually see a lot,
Yeah,
and you see the people impact in lots of different departments of the council. So you would see things like finance, bit more of a, finance people won't love me for saying this, but much more of a mechanical type of process.
Yep.
Social services, where your end customers are children, vulnerable adults, etc. So the approaches were quite different, and unfortunately I couldn't stay there for the whole period of studying for my CIPD, because it was effectively, you know, a training scheme. So you were expected to get a proper job somewhere in the council, hopefully in an area that you liked within your training period. So I ended up in the career service, which was slightly related, but it got me into the regular meeting school leavers, going out and talk to employers about the kind of work experience opportunities that they could offer. So it gave me a very kind of different experience. So the council was great at in my early career at providing lots of opportunities. I moved around a lot, different departments, always doing something different. I settled for quite a while in the education department, who had their own personnel team.
Yeah.
And my first management role was to manage that personnel team, and they managed staff who worked in schools. So
Yes.
couple of thousand teachers and business support staff who worked out in schools were managed from that central team. So I got the opportunity to go and train governing bodies in recruitment and selection, so good recruitment techniques.
Yeah.
We did some equality and diversity training with governors, and governors were getting more influential as that kind of time went on.
So is that sort of unconscious bias now, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It would, yeah.
So there's a real sense from you then that what the draw was, first it was feeling at the heart of things, and you like to know what's going on, and you're sort of getting involved with people. Yeah. Quite an organised person, orderly, so you enjoyed that kind of, you talked about the sort of the office mechanics, but also this idea of variety, and the fact that you kind of have your kit bag of HR knowledge, but you can move it in lots of different places, and that idea of
absolutely
being
right.
Various. Excellent. Okay, so we're getting a sense of the young Anna then, and kind of what inspired you. So tell me, I'm going to move you on now. Tell me a little bit about, I asked you a question about what your biggest mistake was, because one of the things that you were brave enough to answer this. Some of my interviewees have not been so brave. But one of the things I'm really keen to get under the skin of with this is to sort of give some of the HR people, perhaps earlier on in their careers, just some idea about what the substance of being in HR means, and kind of the pitfalls we can land in. And I just thought your mistake really sort of hit the nail on the head. So tell us a little bit about that one. You don't need to mention any names or places, you know, let's protect the innocent. Yeah.
So there was a manager one day. This is a little bit further on in my career, so I wasn't particularly inexperienced. I just should have known better.
Oh, okay.
I think,
like to all of us. Yeah.
So there was a manager who had I think, a bit of a dust up with one of the more junior team members, and was
or just verbal.
No, just verbal, and was absolutely incensed by, I don't think I ever really got to the bottom of exactly what was going on, but it was clearly one of those days where that manager was at the end of their tether. I think the benefit of hindsight, obviously, was at the end of their tether. This particular individual had really rattled their cage, pushed the wrong buttons. Mm-hmm. Manager came bouncing into my room and said, I can't have that person here anymore. They've done this, they've done that, they've said this, they've said that, all between two people. This is a disciplinary matter. And I listened to this for a little bit. And again, benefit of hindsight, should have listened for a lot longer. He said, you've got to do something about this today. Yeah, this, I can't come back to this tomorrow. And so he said, I need you need to suspend this person pending a disciplinary. And I did it.
Okay.
And I shouldn't have done. Absolutely shouldn't have done. And I almost knew as soon as I'd done it that this was the wrong thing to do.
How did you know that? How did you know that?
How did I know that? I didn't ask enough questions. So I didn't try and get to the bottom of, or I didn't try hard enough. This manager was particularly, off on one, as they say, where I come from. They were particularly off on one that day. So, but I didn't try and get to the bottom of actually what the fundamental issue was. Had they just had a row, perfectly acceptable. Had they just had a row, or was there something more to it than that? So I shouldn't have done it. I did realise straight away that I shouldn't have done it, and I spent more time unwinding it afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, well, you can unsuspend somebody, but actually it's much more damaging than that.
Yeah,
so there was quite a lot to unpack afterwards to put that working relationship back together, that probably we wouldn't have had to do to the same extent if I'd have just tried to hold on to that manager from disappearing off into the distance with his particular thoughts on how we should manage that individual.
Yeah.
And I think what it taught me was, don't ever be afraid to ask for time to think about things.
Okay.
These are people that they are people that we're dealing with, and the repercussions of what we say and what we do resonate. Sometimes we do have to we have to suspend in really legitimate circumstances, but the repercussions of that for the individual are quite far-reaching, however we look at it. So it was always to try and take a little bit more time to get to what the best response is in those situations, which may or may not have been what the manager actually said they wanted at that particular time.
And sometimes in those situations, there's a power imbalance as well, isn't there? So there might be quite a senior business manager and you may be relatively junior in HR, and that is uncomfortable. And was there somebody that you could speak to in that role? Because not everybody has that, do they? There's standalone HR roles.
So there probably was, but not immediately available to me. And I think
that you were being pushed at.
Yeah, and I think I felt I was in that situation of, I've got to solve this problem now. And actually, I didn't need to solve that problem now. And I should have had the confidence to say, I hear what you're saying. Let's have a think about how we can best manage that situation. This is what I'm hearing. Let's have a think about how we can best manage that, and just to try and take the sting out of out of the way the manager felt. So I learned a lot of lessons from that scenario.
Because if they come in hot, it can be easy to get swept up in that as well, can't it?
And I think that's what to be
sort of the cooling
kind of happened. Yeah. So you need the effect of the bucket of water.
Exactly.
Let's just try and calm things down. But I learned a lot from that. I never did it again. Never. Yeah.
These are wise words, Anna. Wise words.
But some of that is about confidence as well.
Yes, I wrote confidence down because I think that's interesting to think about. It's not unreasonable for somebody early on in their career, or the first time you've had that hothead come into your office, to be challenged by it. But again, it is that learning, isn't it? Thinking, okay, that didn't go as well as it could. So what will I take forward next time? I think that's really important in HR. I think one of the big challenges with HR, and you mentioned it in one of your responses as well, is that it's never the same problem again. So it can often be really hard to apply learning, can't it? Because it's not always exactly the same. How do you deal with that in sort of your learning?
Well, sometimes the learning that you take from a scenario is that this was right for this situation with these people today.
Yeah.
I could have had a similar thing 2 weeks later, where it might have been a disciplinary. There might have been something slightly different, or the circumstances were different, or but you might have had a similar scenario where the answer wouldn't necessarily have been the same. I think although you gather up all your experience of dealing with all these different situations over time, it is, I think, HR for me, it is variety, but also every situation, you can't, there isn't a book on the shelf that says, when manager comes in having a rant, do this.
Exactly.
Yeah. There isn't that.
And I think it is, I absolutely agree. And I think it's certainly a profession where you do have to use instinct and gut feel,
as
well as experience. It's very much, I think, intuition and intuitive individuals do well in HR, because you do need to be quite responsive, don't you, in the moment?
You do need to be responsive, but also you need not to let yourself be swept along. But you also, I think a key thing for me in that scenario was, don't be scared to take a step back. Don't be scared to say, just let me have a think about that. Just go and have a coffee, or I'll make you a cup of tea, just to buy yourself a little bit of time, so that your responses can be as good as they can be.
And I really like that ownership as well, of saying, I want to think about this so that we make the right decision. I want to help you come up with the right solution, but I want some time to think about it. I think that's really strong, as opposed to, oh, I don't know, I'm going to have to ring my manager. There's a way of saying it, isn't there, that amounts to the same thing, but you are owning it.
Absolutely. And I think some of the criticism that gets levelled at HR colleagues occasionally is that they don't own enough of it, or they don't see a scenario from a business perspective as well as from a, the book says this or the law says this. And I think we've all, sometimes it can be a legitimate challenge, but we've always got to find ways of ensuring that we're supporting the business, but we're still doing the best thing that we can do for the individual, recognizing that there's always at least two people involved in these kinds of scenarios.
And it's not always an easy balance to get that right.
No, it's not.
Taking time to think about it in a calm, measured way, in that example, would have been the right way to do it.
It would.
Well,
it would.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your bravery and honesty there, Anna. Now, I want to move on and talk a little bit about sort of career choices and specialisms versus generalism. Because that's something that really popped for me in your answers. And obviously, it's something I know about you in terms of your background. So I asked you to tell me about what your power move was in terms of the job change that really brought it all together. And you gave me two. And it's the second one I want to talk about. When you talked about really getting a first insight into reward as a specialism, and how that then went on to shape your career. So tell us a little bit about that, because you were a generalist up to that point.
I was. So I'd probably had about 20 years probably of being a generalist in different kinds of organisations, and had gone to that particular organisation as a generalist, which is where we first met in that organisation. So at the time I joined the organisation, we didn't have an HR director. So we were a large business spread all over the country, but we didn't have an HR director. I was the head of HR for a region, and there were 7 or 8 of me dotted around the country. It was an interesting time for that business. They were bringing all of their subsidiaries together into one business. Really interesting time to be an HR professional in that business. So much good stuff to do. And one of the large projects that we had was to harmonise all the terms and conditions for all of the different subsidiary businesses into one. So that at the point at which the business became one, we also had a common set of terms, conditions and benefits across the business. So 3 of us were asked to work on this. And it took us a year. To actually do the project. We uncovered some amazing things that you always do, the little, the things that appear from under the woodwork, from out of the woodwork, when you start to look at how individual offices, part of the same business, have done things very differently. And so we did that project. We got to one set of terms and conditions. The project team, the 3 of us, went round the business to hold staff meetings in each different region. So, I spent quite a few months on trains, just going up and down to different offices to talk about the changes that we were going to make. But we introduced a single benefit structure. And that was probably the first piece of work that I did, which would sit under a reward kind of specialism. Harmonising all the different benefits that people had, buying some out, closing some down, introducing something new. And I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole project, to be honest. It was one of those, for me, a kind of once in a lifetime type big business. A project that I really loved. By then we did have an HR director, and when that project was finished and we'd done all the implementation, we didn't have a reward team. We didn't have any structure for reward at all. Some things were managed by the HR director. Some key benefits were managed by the HR director. But other than that, everything pay related was largely managed by individual managing partners for their regions and their heads of HR. So as part of bringing things together, they decided that they would create a reward function. I was asked if I wanted to kick it off and get it started. So I thought, okay, well, I'll do this for a bit and I'll see how this goes then. And that's the end of the story, because the challenge in really great experience in being able to set up what reward meant in that organisation, to do lots of work on pay, benchmarking, setting up and implementing new benefits, getting cost efficiencies out of the existing benefits package that we got. There was so much to do. We were never a large team. We had a reward advisor, and then latterly a policy advisor who was attached to our team as well. So largely we just worked as a team of 2.
What was it about rewards then that interested you? What do you think were the aspects?
I like the analytical part of it. So I loved all the, I did like all the pay and benchmarking.
Love a spreadsheet.
Love a spreadsheet. Yeah, love a spreadsheet. My advisor was the best at manipulating data, but it was also having evidence, being able to use data to evidence things that we might want to do in the future. Yeah. So there was we introduced a bonus scheme. I think we designed and implemented a bonus scheme in about 3 weeks. So huge help from colleagues in finance, but there was so much interest in making sure that the business remained competitive with its peers. Yes. Highly competitive environment. So what do we need to do? So there was lots of space for initiative. How's about this? If you've got an idea about this, let's cost that. In the days when salary sacrifice benefits, you could salary sacrifice almost anything. Then, we had everything, because those that, so we had lots of new things to launch, which is always the really good part of, of anything. But it was being able to use data and the kind of analytics to support, if you do this, we think we can get this amount of engagement into this initiative. That sets us apart from these people over here who don't do that. Yeah.
And it was a time, wasn't it, in the professional services sphere where the kind of the comparing like for like when people were job moving
all the time.
It was sort of margins of difference, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So I think it's interesting, isn't it, to think as well, to sort of showcase to people this idea that you can start as a generalist, but that doesn't preclude preclude you from specialising further down the line.
No.
And it's kind of getting a sense of where your preferences and interests lie. But I really like that example because you were given the opportunity to do a project. It was a sort of a project and then back to your job at the start, wasn't it?
It was.
And then it evolved into something else. And it's this idea as well of being open to what opportunities come along.
Yeah.
And like, well, let's give it a try and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is part of managing your own career, looking at I do believe that no opportunity is ever wasted. So if you're asked to participate in a project, it's generally because somebody thinks you've got something to give.
Yes.
You've got something to offer in that project. So you need to grab those opportunities. And if they don't come naturally, if somebody doesn't come looking for you, you need to be putting your hand up and saying, I'm really interested in that. I'd like to volunteer. And to not be blinkered when you look at what your career might look like, and actually to just open your eyes to the richness of opportunities that HR can give you.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, we are at our last question now, Anna. We've come full circle. So tell us a little bit about where you are at now and what's next for you. You're a slightly different candidate than my previous conversation.
I absolutely am. So I actually retired from Riverside, which was my last group head of reward role, in June 2024. I've done 44 years in HR, which is such a scary number. I've no idea how I've actually got to that age.
They would not believe it was true, Anna.
No. Well, that's very nice of you to say. So I have retired from full-time work. It was just one of those moments. The time was right. So what have I done since then? So I've been to Vietnam and Cambodia and Dubai. I've been to Vienna. I'm going to Lanzarote in a fortnight. So there's a theme here. It's called
retirement.
Make use of a passport. Make use of a passport. I think I kind of drew there was a real full stop at the end of June. And I wanted to have some time to work out whether it should be a hard stop.
Is it turning a page? Is it a new book?
Is it something
that full stop is?
So, I've worked for myself before, kind of in between permanent roles. So, and I'd get to the point where I think, well, okay, I'd think about doing some more work, but it's got to be for the right interest. It's got to be something that is going to be really interesting. Could be something I've done before. Could be something I've never done before. So I wanted to give myself at least 6 months. I've not really had those 6 months yet, but in a few months' time, I might consider an odd interim opportunity. But in the meantime, I am actually enjoying. I'm enjoying spending time with John.
Yeah.
We're enjoying. I'm looking out the window because the sun's shining today. That's quite rare in Denverdale, but there you go. But the sun's shining today. We would normally have gone out and had a long walk somewhere. So I'm enjoying being outside and spending time doing things that I didn't really have that much time to do. But I can't quite say yet that it's absolutely the end.
The whisper of HR is still there calling you back. But, in between trips, obviously.
In between trips. Yeah, absolutely. In between trips.
Well, I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you
so much for giving me some time to talk today. And I really hope, in fact, I know that everybody listening will have learnt and had some really good takeaways about how they can develop their HR career, and also kind of that sense of opportunity and being open to what might come their way. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Anna. This is one of a series of Your HR Career, the new podcast. Do please check out the episodes, which you can find on my Substack. And thanks very much for listening.